it is a critical season for Kyle Shanahan, and it feels a little bit like, or a lot like 2014, the final year for Jim Harbaugh. Karan, you laid it all out to me. Let's break it down for the good people watching. Take it away.
Okay, so for our older 49er fans that, were there for the Harbaugh days, I just want to 10 years ago, the 49ers right around Thanksgiving were 7-4. They were hanging pretty well. They had just won a great game. They had gone to Seattle, a team that they lost to, and frankly, Russell Wilson basically owned them. And they got their asses kicked on Thanksgiving. That's that famous turkey leg. Jed York tweeting, "This is unacceptable." Basically, that was the end of the Niners, and they never really recovered after that. And they played Seattle again, and they lost again to Seattle that same year. They were 7-4, tied with Seattle for first place or close to it. Definitely a wild card team, and they finished 8. They only won one game after that. Mm-hmm. And what I remember and was strikingly familiar is that they lost Navarro Bowman prior, right? They were without their linebacker for the NFC Championship that got injured, and they're without Greenlaw this year. So that's one, but getting past a coach and getting past a player that basically had their number, and they had basically, I think, inside had realized that this is as far as they were going to go. They were never going to beat the team like they were.
And it was getting worse.
It was getting worse, yes.
Yeah.
Because Seattle was getting worse, but it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter because Seattle kept on, because Seattle had a quarterback, right? Until Russell Wilson has gone away, all we know is like, hey, we beat Seattle. But
it wasn't just that. Yes, Russell Wilson was incredible, and they couldn't contain him. But Seattle's defense would make the 49ers offense look awful. It would be like 16 points, 17 points, 3 points,
correct.
3 points. It's like, oh, and that's kind of what, like the ownage that Pete Carroll had over Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh is very similar to Steve Spagnuolo versus Kyle Shanahan.
Very much so. So much so that they had to essentially look themselves in the mirror and say, this group isn't going to cut it. Right. And so that brings me to the point of Kyle kind of at crossroads. He's got some few teams that he just simply cannot beat. And the team that he has to beat, Kansas City, say the 49ers run the table like they did last year. Say they do really well. Outside of Baltimore and the AFC, is there anyone that's really going to beat the Chiefs? Like, the Chiefs stink, but they just got reinforcements. They're going to only get better.
And I'm not even sure Baltimore could have the ultimate team and they can still find a way to not win in the playoffs.
Yes, because their quarterback kind of has the yips a little bit when it comes
to
a little bit, right?
Yep.
And so does anyone feel really confident in February when they're playing the Chiefs that they're going to win? No.
And you know who feels the least confident? The 49ers.
The players.
Because it's been demonstrated. They can't beat them, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, if this was the time to beat them, even Vegas agreed. I mean, the line had ballooned to 3 or 2.5 before the game had started. Kansas City was ripe for the taking. They did not have a functioning offense, and it only got worse because their player got injured before Ayuk's player, got injured. And that it didn't matter. It didn't matter, and I think. One thing that I am seeing, and one thing that ended up being Harbaugh's downfall, was the players stopped believing in Harbaugh. That message basically became, what does this guy know? We've been to this many, he rolled those players really hard. And sometimes those players, looking back, were like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. What are we doing? And I'm not hearing Kyle's a genius and he calls a touchdown before he calls it now, are we?
Nope. No, that was like 5 years ago. We used to hear that all the time, but now it's like, how could you not roll your eyes a little bit if you're a veteran on this team who's heard Kyle Shanahan talk about how he's going to beat the Chiefs like 5 times, and every time he can't find a way to pick up the blitz, every time he can't find a hot route. Like, at a certain point, 30 years old, like, man, it's like, I've been listening to this guy forever, and I just don't buy it anymore.
And that happens. There's a reason why, like, this happens more often than not. The coach's message often goes stale with that group. And if that core group gets old and they've accomplished a lot of things, but they end up going down, usually the coach leaves with them. That's a very normal thing. Kyle's on year 8, right? Year 8. And I think it's been 6 years that they have been relevant. Being relevant 6 years roughly in the NFL is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's better than most franchises in a row. I mean, you know what I mean? I also think the team got old fast because they played probably the equivalents of another season when you add in the playoffs, the Super Bowls, even the losses. They don't lose early, they lose late. So they're playing 2 or 3, 4 extra games a year. You times that by 3 or 4 years, you almost have a full season of bruising on your body. And here's the other thing, their recovery time, like Harbaugh, that team got in 14, that team got old so quickly because they had gone through 3 NFC championships in a row and a Super Bowl, and they ran out of gas.
Yeah, like we didn't know it, but Patrick Willis was at the end. Vernon Davis was approaching the end. Frank Gore would go on to play for a very long time.
He's the exception.
But he was pretty much at the end of his prime. And Colin Kaepernick was approaching the end of his era of being, a factor.
So great point.
Player.
That's another point. Can Brock prevent what happened to Colin because the league caught up with Colin that year? I think more so than ever when it came to passing downs.
And what's scary about Brock is we're seeing some troubling splits, like his numbers against zone versus his numbers against man. Sure, if Christian McCaffrey's out there, then you're going to have good numbers against both because he can shred it. But if you take away the offensive player of the year and there's no replacement for that, like there's no Marshall Faulk 2.0, there's no Christian McCaffrey 2.0, are you just ordinary? Replaceable? I think guess we'll find out.
I think he has great pocket awareness. Yes. I think he's got some good moxie. I think he's a good leader. I just think
he works hard.
He is very much the anti-Jimmy where he's
accountable.
He's accountable. I just think you can't. The windows have become tighter and tighter. And here's the other thing and we can get to this other point. Kyle really hasn't matched his personnel with what he's trying to do. So what does that mean? Like Brock is holding the ball. He's going for deep shots. Mm-hmm. He's got yak guys. He doesn't have exceptional route runners. He doesn't have burners. He's got people that run in space and truckload people. Well, if you hold on to the ball and you're slow, guess what's going to happen? The DB is going to catch up and you're going to have a window that's this big, right, to throw in. Yep. And I have seen more contested catches and more contested incompletions that I have all of last season. Like all of last season. And so I think that has to do a little bit of personnel. I also, in my mind, Kyle hasn't been, I feel like Kyle's like, we'll just get to 500. I'm simplifying this, but just get to 500 until we get Christian and everything's going to be okay. Like that's what he's making.
We don't have to actually make any adjustments because Christian is coming back. Aslan is on the move.